All righty, we'll go ahead and get started. This session is being recorded and I will share the slides out with Kenneth and Abe so that y'all have them afterwards. Feel free during the session to interact and ask questions in the chat. I will try to keep watch on it. I know, if you presented on Zoom before, it's a lot of fun once you're sharing your screen, but I'll keep track with that. Feel free to also pop on camera to ask any questions. My name is Lisa Cote, and I serve as the Assistant Director over in-state recruitment at the University of South Carolina. So I have a team of admissions counselors who travel this state as well as a few others surrounding, and you likely will meet them on the road if you are traveling the circuit this year in South Carolina. I also have served on a few different committees within CACRAO and the 2020 past president. So where I served for the 2019-2020 year. And I can answer questions about CACRAO if you have those as well. The reason why I'm doing this session also is because I have been a school counselor. I was in admissions for just under 7 years and then wanted to see what the other side of the desk looked like. So I served as a school counselor for the Governor's School for Science and Mathematics in Hartsville, South Carolina for 3 years, and then missed admissions. So now I'm back. And CACRAO too. That was the other reason. But I wanted to share tips and tricks that I've learned along the way, having been in admissions for a while now, but then also seeing things and maybe pitfalls that reps did during the year that were irritating as a school counselor, and also just ways to build those relationships. I really wish this was in person because I feel like that's what Newcomers is all about, is building relationships. So hopefully you recognize a few names and would love to hear more from y'all as we go through this. But I'm going to ask for some interaction here in the chat in just a moment. So the first question I have for you is, what are you hoping to get out of this session? I would not be a good presenter if I wasn't able to hit on a few of the topics, or at least touch back with you with some answers or some advice later on after the session is over. So take a moment. What would you like to learn from this session? And I'll make sure we cover it. Also, if it's easier to unmute and share, that's also very welcome. Absolutely. There's a huge disconnect. I feel like we're working in two different realms, and the only way we can connect right now is email and maybe a phone call here and there. Fantastic. Well, if you think of other questions, ways to stay connected, absolutely. Alrighty. So this is what I have prepared for you today, and I'll make sure to touch on these points that you guys have in the chat here as well. So first, I want to share more about who you're building a relationship with. This group that we call school counselors, but really it could be CBOs or it could be career specialists. We're just using that terminology right now. It's really that connection point between you and the high school or the organization, and how to really build that mutually beneficial relationship so that both of you are getting to the same goal and helping serve students. Next, just to convey a little bit about the challenges that school counselors face. And these were all really pre-COVID challenges, and I think that's all been exacerbated by this disconnect between not only the students being in the school or not, virtually or not, but school counselors having way more on their plate than they ever have before because of the social emotional piece of their positions. And then again, how to build that mutually beneficial relationship. So you aren't stalking them, and so you are staying connected. And so you are building a relationship that truly, not just from the year that you're in now, but 20 years from now, you'll re-encounter those people that you met your first year and remember that experience, and they'll remember you as well. You may be in totally different positions, but I think that's what's most wonderful about this field is that we change positions, whether to the other side of the desk or not, but also change institutions, and we'll run across people that you've seen. And if you've built that really strong relationship in your first position, it's going to carry through years from now. And I think one of the best things about CACRAO, getting to know people that you have met through college fairs or school counselor conferences, there's still folks that I keep in touch with that are in very different positions than they were when I first met them. And then some tips and tricks. So what to do and then what not to do. And I definitely want to hear if anyone has any good advice as well at the end. We'll share out some challenges and successes as well, so that everybody can hear from each other, learn from each other. I've had my own experience. You may have encountered something else, and then we'll go from there. Okay, so my other question to y'all is, what is it that you want from school counselors? Whenever you are thinking about building that relationship, what are you ultimately trying to achieve? And feel free to drop that in the chat or unmute and share out what you think you need or want from school counselors. And this can be broad or very specific. Yes, some data, maybe some transcripts of sorts. Let me give y'all some time. Yeah, absolutely. Identifying who might be interested from their high school. Yes, definitely an opportunity to present rather than sit in a lunchroom. That would be wonderful, but we'll take it if we can get it. Yeah, so there are a couple of things that you may reach out to a school counselor about, and it really, that connection piece will be critical in figuring out if you can get that piece of data, a transcript, or just a visit at their high school. And so the reverse is also true. What do you think school counselors want from you when you either visit or when they connect with you? What is it that they're hoping to get from you? This one's a little trickier. There's a lot more that we are asking of the school counselors than what they are expecting from us. But what we are really the holders of information regarding our institution. And so I think sharing out information, just like we want data from them, deadlines, requirements, any relevant information, success stories of alumni. They want to hear from you about your institution, and also just in general, the updates that have changed since the last time that they've spoken with someone from your school. All right, so I like to think of both the school counselor and the admissions representative being gatekeepers. There's actually a book that's titled in this name. It's not great when you think of it in access terms for higher education, but it is true. There are pieces of our jobs that make us gatekeepers for different reasons. So the first, and what school counselors really want from us, they want us to admit their students. That's really the ultimate goal. They don't want to have to counsel a denied student, but eventually they will, or a student who's being redirected. And so they see college representatives as gatekeepers. They are either hoping to get their students into your institution, or as someone mentioned, that information. Really, if you don't have that insight or that information, you're not a resource to them if you don't have correct details or just insight about what students are successful at your institution and how you convey that to them. And then we see them as gatekeepers because they are typically the ones who are allowing access into the school. They're usually our contact for how we're able to make a presentation, or even if you're attending an adult college fair, they're the ones helping plan that event at their high schools. So we see those folks as really the end all be all and the main point of contact. Then school counselors are also the folks that will recommend your institution to students. So if you have a school counselor who does not want to recommend your institution, they are really preventing students from enrolling. So if they have a bad experience with your school, they're probably less likely to be really gung-ho about recommending you, or if a student has bad experience with you or your institution, that can all really affect how a school counselor views your institution. You're definitely going to come across school counselors and teachers who have their bias towards their alma mater that they went to, and they're going to be really excited to share that. But I think any good school counselor is going to try and stay unbiased and be able to recommend schools based off of fit for the student. Again, they provide those academic transcripts, or someone in the school counseling and registrar's office will be able to provide that for both either the student who needs it to complete the application or to send it in an official way, once they're enrolling. And I think lastly, the thing that makes them gatekeepers is that because they're able to recommend your institution, if they know the student or know of the student, they are able to say, hey, I think this student would be a great fit at XYZ institution, or just know that they're interested in a certain type of institution, whether they've said, I want to go to a 2-year institution, or I want to be an ROTC when I am going to college. They typically have a good pulse on the student population. They may not know every single student, but they're going to know a few things about each student that will help them guide those students to different institutions. I think whenever you're thinking about connecting with someone, they become the enemy if you can't get a hold of them. And I think right now with schools opening back up from sort of a hybrid sense that they were in the spring, I think it feels probably even more so like this, but they are truly not the enemy in the process. And we have that shared common goal where we're here to assist students in whatever post-secondary success or endeavors that they have in the future. So if we align across that same goal, it'll be achieved. If you're reaching out to a school counselor and saying you want to help their students, 9 times out of 10, they're going to be willing to aid you in that process. So I want to share a quick video that I think shares good insight to what a school counselor's day looks like. And so bear with me as I transition to that share screen, and I'll make sure that y'all can see and hear this video.
Hello, we are your school counselors. We are here to show you the many strengths of a high school counselor. High school counselors believe that relationships are fundamental. High school counselors usually work as a team. Most counselors have a caseload of about 300 to 500 students, so collaboration is essential. School counselors work with the whole person and the environment around them. This means we help students with all aspects of their development, from academic to career to personal social. We also collaborate with all the people in the student's life, their families, teachers, and friends, in order to foster success. Why does this matter to you? School counselors collaborate in the school community. Our interventions not only impact a student's social and emotional development, but also impact academic achievement and career success. First, let's address a few misconceptions about the high school counselor. Although we do write recommendation letters and schedule students, we are not just a records keeper. Counselors do not sit behind a desk all day. They have many conversations and are active in changing the school environment. School counselors also collect data. Our research keeps us accountable and makes sure that students are getting what they truly need. From our programming, along with the school's annual performance data, including graduation rates, school counselor contributes to the student's success in these areas and has the results to prove it. Most importantly, counselors value relationships, both with you and with the students. High school counselors have the unique privilege of working with students as they embrace and struggle with the independence that comes with their impending transition into adulthood. A strong relationship can help ease some of these anxieties about the new beginning. High school counselors carry out comprehensive developmental counseling programs. This program is broken down into 4 main areas: guidance curriculum, individual student planning, responsive services, and system support. Most days involve a little bit of everything. This curriculum may include small groups, but at the high school level, classroom guidance is typically more common. Now check out the areas that the curriculum could focus on. We would love to talk more about these at a later point in time.
The first main area is guidance curriculum. An example of this is at Mr. Monroe's school. College enrollment rates have been dropping in recent years. Through a needs assessment, Mr. Monroe finds that students don't believe they can attend college because of the high costs. To address this, Mr. Monroe plans to visit all the 12th grade English classes and present a lesson on financial aid and scholarships in the fall. The second area, individual student planning, involves meeting with students one-on-one to help them plan for the future. This could include helping a student complete and understand a career assessment, finding a way to resolve a conflict with a peer, or arranging extra help in a class. Responsive services are what counselors don't plan for but are always ready for, ranging from a parent dropping in to peer mediation to helping a student in grief and much more. For example, Miss Harrell had 2 students come to visit her, concerned about a friend who had been making comments about suicide. She listened to the students and then privately met with the student of concern, providing counseling and following district protocol for implementing a suicide risk assessment. System support is everything that counselors do to support students in the school that doesn't involve working directly with students. For example, professional development. Last fall, Ms. Martin attended North Carolina's School Counselor Convention to learn the latest counseling programs around the state and the country. This professional development ensures that her counseling program remains fresh and relevant.
Okay, so let's slow down and recap what we have learned. Counselors are involved in these 4 main areas. These areas together contribute to creating a counselor's comprehensive program and success within the school. Always remember that as counselors, we are here to serve all students. In order to do this, we need to work as a team, and collaborating is key. Therefore, make sure you get to know us. We are absolutely awesome, and we would love to meet you and help you out.
All right. I share this video. I think it's great because it's actually, North Carolina high school, and they talk about the CACRAO School Counselor Conference in it, which I think is really sort of a full circle moment, but it's a good way of seeing all the different demands that are placed on the school counselor throughout a regular day, and those include all of these that I sort of culled into this one list. Bus duty being something that you might not think, hey, they're not even in the building, they are assisting with the transportation of students. And oh yeah, there's college and career counseling. That's something they wish they could put on their plate potentially more. And I'm really talking here about your large public high school counselors in this setting. But as a smaller high school that I was involved with, I can say that most of these were on my list of things to do, and really different times of year meant more stress. So for example, the coordinating testing, while I wasn't in charge of the PSAT testing that week, and the reason why typically there's not an event on that day, even if it's just for juniors, is that they're tied up. They have a lot of things on their plate that they're trying to coordinate. And so college visits is just not possible in that week. So I also like to think about how school counselors are viewed in our society, and through movies and television shows, school counselors are actually the scapegoats for the students or the parents. And it's true, I think in real life, a lot of times is that it's easy for the student to say, oh, my school counselor didn't tell me about your application deadline, or, oh, my school counselor forgot to send my transcript. And, those are the stories we hear. And in most cases, they're not necessarily true. The school counselor has a lot of different things on their plate, but in our movies, it's like, oh, my guidance counselor didn't tell me I'd be a great actress or whatever. And so I think this cartoon is hilarious because They're also considered the dream crushers. And again, if they have a lot of things on their plate and a student is coming to them with this unrealistic goal in mind based off of the academic career that they see on their transcript and what they know about the student in the high school, it is a hard position to be in, because they are the ones saying, hey, I don't think with all C's on your transcript, you're probably going to get in. And they try to prepare them for that disappointment that they might get. And so again, they're blamed a lot. And I think that can get into their heads a little bit, because, you know, not only students, but parents, and they really don't have as much time to really specialize in a certain area, especially if they're at a public high school. And I think I mentioned earlier that the school counselors aren't all created equal. So it really will depend on their cohort size of students that they're responsible for advising. And in some cases, that might mean they have students from 9th through 12th grade that they're advising. They may only have, you know, a certain number of juniors, a certain number of seniors, and then, you know, a different set of school counselors takes care of younger students. I was really fortunate to have a small cohort size that I worked with, but even 15 additional students that were added at one point in a year, really, you know, I could feel the difference. It meant more meetings, more recommendation letters, more transcripts, just more. And so when you're talking 100 different students in a swing of a cohort size, I mean, that really does add it just compounds it. And one of the high schools not far from here in Columbia was sharing with us that they only have time in their school year for student meetings that take up 75% of every single day / week / year. So they're left with 25% of their total time in school to know all the emails, attend staff meetings, go to professional development, and then also book college rep visits. So that just example of time that they have is hopefully something that you can take as you're considering reaching out to a school. It's not to prevent you from doing so, it's just to go in knowing that there may be some school counselors that literally have to have some sort of work-life balance because they just don't have time in the day for everything. It's an unfortunate thing in our society. And then obviously, if you're working with an independent high school counselor versus a public high school counselor, or a charter school, or an independent educational consultant, they're not created equal. You know, I mentioned the public high schools have higher cohort sizes, and independent usually is smaller, but that really can range. You know, it really just depends on the high school, the size of the high school, the number of school counselors that school has employed, or if you work in a district that is that has a career specialist, which is wonderful. You know, there's a set of schools in the Columbia area that have a career specialist at every single high school. Now, it's wonderful because they're really, you know, honing in on that one piece of the puzzle for students, but that also means that they have the entire senior class for all college planning. So there are different ways that work for different school districts, and I can't really say there's a great way. The only great thing would be is if we could get funding for more school counselors, which, you know, I think will be on the way, especially with counseling through this time of COVID. That is something that I think, you know, school districts, states, and nationally is of attention. And then I mentioned the career development facilitator, which is great if you can have that contact at a particular high school, or maybe there's a college specific counselor. So at my school, there were college specific counselors, and then there were social emotional specific counselors, which was great because we really could identify the needs, then come together and figure out a plan for a student. But again, it just depends on the school. All right, so the reason why you're here, how to build that relationship, how to make that connection point, and hopefully you've already started, you know, speaking with some school counselors if you've been in this role for more than just a day. And so I broke it up into sort of tangible takeaways for starting with year one. You know, as you're going into this profession, what are the first few things that you can do to set that base for a relationship going forward? I also should say that this takes time. It's not something that you're going to come out the gate and have this, you know, group of 100 counselors that you have phenomenal relationships with. And you're also not if you go in with the expectation of having an amazing relationship with every school counselor, you're going to come back with disappointment. I think you really just have to create that base and build year after year. And a lot of it is just consistency. Some school counselors expect that they're just going to get a different rep from your institution every year, or that they're just going to have a hard time potentially getting in contact with you because they had a bad experience with someone else at a different institution. So, you know, a lot of different expectations may not be met. But here's what you can do. So first, you should figure out who that primary contact is at the high school. And this is like a game of hide and go seek on a website, especially if it's not updated. I think in many times you'll find the person that'll say, hey, we're the ones doing the college visits, or you'll call the school and say, hey, can I speak with whoever is handling college rep visits? And you know, they'll send you to a voicemail that's a completely different name than the person you had in your Excel spreadsheet, or however you're keeping track of your counselor names in your CRM. And you may also get those auto replies, you know, hey, I'm not at the school anymore, but please reach out to XYZ. So this is probably the hardest part of figuring your way through your first year, is who is your person, and it may be 4 or 5 contacts at one particular high school, but who is the one person that you know that you can reach out to for whatever the case is, whether it's a visit or a transcript, or just in general, hello, I am your rep, you know, I'm here to help. I think spelling their name correctly goes a really long way. I know we hate to see our name spelled incorrectly as an introduction email, so triple check it, because I think that's the first thing that, like, if they've got an inbox full of 100 emails and their name's spelled incorrectly, they're like, oh, this person didn't even take the time to figure out who I am. I recommend, in building a relationship, sending an introductory email first. You know, hello, my name is Lisa Cote. I serve as the representative from XYZ institution, and I also work with your students to help them through the process for applying to our college. Give that like background so they know, hey, you are my person. So even if you can't get in touch with whoever it is, there's an email somewhere saying, like, I'm the rep for, you know, the Columbia area, in our case for USC. I think when they see your name, they see that rep, you know, introduction, they hopefully will squirrel it away in their mind. And even if they don't respond to your email, it's still something that they've seen as like a, you know, in the preview screen of their Outlook or whatever service they use. And then call. So if you just blind call and say, hey, I'm so-and-so from XYZ school, they're on the phone or they're going to another meeting, and the secretary is saying, hey, you've got, you know, USC on the phone, they're going to be more likely to take your phone call if they're like, oh yeah, that's my rep. That's the person I saw in an email, you know, I haven't gotten to everything. But if you just blind call, they're not really going to know why you're calling, or who to call back if they didn't get your full voicemail, and they can always go back and search in the email once they know, oh yeah, I need to go back and reach back out. So I think that's worked for the majority of school counselors that I've reached out to, but you know, each person is different and they have a preferred way of connecting, and you know, you'll figure that out as you work through your list of contacts. Again, introduce yourself, whether you're the territory manager or just in general saying, hey, I'm the main point of contact for this institution for y'all's high school, reach out to me. I think what I've observed in this last you know, cycle or two is that they latch on to someone at your school, and whether that person decides at the institution to change roles or moves up and isn't necessarily the contact for the high school, they still have their email and they still email them. So we really have to, you know, bombard them with emails saying, hey, I'm your rep, for them to remember, like, oh yeah, it was XYZ, now it's ABC. So make sure that's really clear in your email. All right, within that same year, data, just like someone said earlier, is something that is nice from them. It is really crucial if you can pull some data for them to see. So in your introductory email, or when you're asking for a high school visit, it's pretty cool if you can pull some application data, or how many students enrolled from this past year, or, the most popular major of their students applying to your institution. It takes time. This is not something we would necessarily do for every single high school, but if you can pull in a few pieces of information that might be interesting to them, then they might be more interested in reading your email. So this is also a really nice just addition after a visit concludes. So maybe you did schedule that visit, and within that same week, later in the week, you might email them to say, hey, thank you so much for letting me in to speak with your students. I saw 25 seniors and 2 juniors, and it was a great visit. Here are the students that seemed really interested. Let me know if I can help with anything as you work with them through the application process. Because a lot of times they're not always sitting in that presentation. So it's nice to know, hey, students showed up to my visit. So it was worthwhile. So data is critical. And then you may hear of school counselor events or events for professional development that are in your area or that your institution is providing. So make sure to include them. And that's a great outreach to a high school counselor. It's like, hey, I know you're in your first year just like I am, and there's this school counselor event that is in South Carolina, North Carolina, or the College Board Conference, or the Sweet Tea Tour that takes school counselors around to different colleges in South Carolina. Invite them to those, send them the link. Like, this is a really awesome opportunity. You should check it out. It shows that you care, and it shows that you're invested in their professional development and connections, and it will go a huge, long way, especially if it isn't for your own institution. But those are great too. If you host a breakfast or a counselor luncheon or something like that, they love food, invite them. They will appreciate it. And then this is the toughest one, is that you'll meet them at a high school or you'll meet them at a conference, and you remember the face. You remember you went to their high school, but you have no clue who they are, especially in your first year. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't remember her name. But I remember I saw her, a couple months ago. It's still good to acknowledge them. If you don't remember their name, hey, how are you? It's so great to see you. Make sure it's like, it was so great to be at your school. If you act like you don't know who they are, they're not going to be invested in creating that relationship. They'll probably remember who you are a lot easier because you're the one person coming into the school versus, you meeting all the students and all the counselors across the numerous weeks of travel that may be included in your schedule. Okay, so your first visit, if you ultimately do go to a high school or maybe a college fair or anything that you're interacting with a CBO or school counselor or career development specialist, you should always have a stack of business cards or some way for them to get back in contact with you. And we have stickers for our reps, which is really cool because they can just put it on the brochure. And it's not like this extra piece of paper that can get lost really easily. And each school counselor is going to want it to use it differently. I always would write the year that I visited, or like month and year, because once school counselors get a bunch of business cards, it's hard for them to remember, is this my contact from this year that came, or like 3 years ago that's in my desk drawer? So if you put your the year or month that you visited, then they'll know, hey, this is the one I need to contact versus that rep from 3 years ago. Yeah, I agree, Jordan. It was a good tip given to me as a school counselor. So like when they came, I would write it on there if I didn't see it. And so they'll keep you top of mind. You should always bring note cards, pen, paper, something. In many cases, you're not able to meet with the school counselor because they're in a meeting. They've set up the room for you to do a presentation, but you maybe never connect because they get called into a parent meeting and you never see them. I always try to leave a note, even if it takes, a couple of minutes and I'm trying to rush to the next thing I've got. Just like, hey, thank you so much. It was a great visit. Appreciate your time setting up the room. The students were great. Whatever it is that you want to share with them, and your name and email and phone number is great, or with your business card. And then leave it at the front desk or the secretary or, outside their office, however you can get it to them. It's just a good connection point so that they know you actually showed up, because they don't know. They set up the room, but did the rep come? Hard to say. So they'll really appreciate the note of thanks after. And if you can, and budgets are tight, a token of appreciation is really nice too. So this can be as small as a button or a nice pen. They love pens. You know, if you have a pen from your institution, you can leave it with the note card. It's just a little something. Or if you're able to, you know, especially for schools that maybe are your key feeder high schools, and you can provide a box of donuts or something for the school counselors all together, and you can bring it when you drop off, you know, any materials. That's a great just thank you. Even if they don't like donuts, they'll still appreciate you thinking of them. And then one thing that you should always keep with you when you go to a high school is to have their phone number ready, because a lot of times they won't tell everyone in the school that you're going to be there. And so by calling them, you can hopefully catch them in the school, even after you've been set up in whatever presentation room, just to leave a voicemail, say, hey, thank you so much. You know, I got to my room, gave the presentation, it was great. Or if there are any concerns or issues, you can hopefully connect with them while somebody else is looking for them in the high school. It's just a good way as well if you are running late to an event for traffic reasons, and if you don't show up on time and they're expecting you, they hopefully will get that phone call before you get there, and know that you cared, that you're running behind. All right, so after the first year, this is something to continue year after year, and you should absolutely send a thank you email, even if you got 0 applications or no students decided to come from their high school. It's a nice way to just say thank you so much for all the work that you did this year. Again, if you want to provide data, that's great. You know, hey, you sent this many transcripts. We couldn't do this without you. Just a quick thank you. There's also National School Counseling Week in February. That's a nice way or a nice reminder to say, hey, y'all are awesome. You do everything to help your students. We appreciate you. And they like it. Even if it's another email, it's still something. And then success stories are huge. So especially if you've been in this field for a little while, you know, you'll work with a school counselor. There's a student that finally gets admitted, and then after the year is over, that student comes and applies to be an ambassador with your office or whatever. I think it's awesome if you can go back and say to that school counselor, hey, you remember XYZ, they're doing great, and you know, they're now an ambassador, or just seeing that trajectory of the student. The counselors are in this business because they really care about students, and so that really just will increase that relationship bond that you have with that particular school counselor, because that's something you had to take time out of your day to share with them. Or if your institution does like success stories, that's a great link to share out. If you figure out the high school or where that student came from and then email it back to that high school, even if you don't have a great relationship, still a nice connection. Invite them to events ongoing, those school counselor breakfasts, all of the different things that might be out there, or even your open house days. So they think of that as something that students should attend, but on a Saturday, they may be interested in coming to hear more about your school. So you get them a special registration link so that they can attend your open house as well, or just any admitted student day, anything that they think that might be helpful in their learning about your institution versus creating a separate event just for them. Yeah, update them on changes that are happening within your institution. And before that change hits like sort of mainstream, if you can say to a school counselor, hey, we have a new neuroscience major coming. It's not on the website yet, but it's approved and it will be available for students starting in X term. If you can give them that little piece of information that nobody else has, they're going to be the rock star superstar in the high school. So every student that's interested in neuroscience, they will remember, oh yeah, and USC just added that as a major. So any kind of update that you can provide is truly awesome for them. And then if you don't already have a school counselor appreciation event, you should consider hosting one, whether it's with just your institution or maybe a group of institutions coming together to host a breakfast to talk about updates or just create that relationship avenue. We are in a world now where breakfasts, luncheons, and all that may be a little bit more hesitation for school counselors, but hopefully in a year or two, we'll be able to connect more with school counselors face to face versus just endless phone calls to try to connect with them, or emails, or however you can find a way to connect. All right, I've shared a lot of things about what you should be doing, but these are things you should never do when you're talking with school counselors. And the thing that they dislike the most is showing up unannounced. I think pre-COVID, this was absolutely a safety concern for school counselors. If someone from the front desk called them and said, hey, so-and-so from somewhere is here, you know, do you want to come meet with them, or can they come meet with you? And that sort of alarm bell goes off, like, I wasn't expecting someone, like, who is this? I don't recognize their name. And this happened to me, and I was just the college rep contact. And the first few things that went through my brain was, oh my gosh, I totally forgot there was a visit happening today. Like, I don't even know what school. They say college rep, but who is it? Like, oh, I don't have it on my agenda. And so panic. I mean, that's really the only word that I can think of that describes everything with just showing up to a high school. So don't do it. The other thing you shouldn't do is call the school, leave a voicemail, be like, hey, I'd love to drop by and bring some materials, but they didn't get a chance to read your email or listen to your voicemail, and still you showed up 2 days later. It's nice that you gave a heads up, but still, just don't do it. It's really make sure that they've gotten you know, your information before you just drop by asking to speak with them. And then you should not show up empty-handed. I was actually shocked with how many college reps came to a visit, either had run out of materials for that week, or didn't have business cards, or just weren't prepared for a high school visit and were thinking that just themselves would be enough to talk to students, and it wasn't. So I think if you don't have materials, and you know, students are expected to take something from your school, I don't know, you know, depending on what your institution is passing out, they should have something to take away, even if it's not a full brochure. Something is super nice, and as well for the school counselor. And never complain that you were given this tiny closet to present in to students. You still thank them graciously, because that was probably the only place available. Just don't do it. Don't be like, next time I really need a better space, or hey, you gave me this room and we were all squeezed in. Just remember for next year to ask for a different space versus like telling them it was not okay during the visit. And then the opposite of coming to a high school visit empty-handed was leaving a stack of 100 brochures and saying, oh, I'm just going to leave these here so that, you know, if you have students later on that are interested that didn't make the visit, they can come get it. We would keep some for our school counseling office. There are some high schools that will not let you leave any brochures as well, or you have to have all digital stuff. Whatever the spectrum is, if they say, no, it's okay, you know, I only need like 2 or 3, I'm going to keep one in my office or whatever, please don't just dump your materials. I think what ends up happening is at the end of the week, they don't want to fly back with them, or they don't want to put them in their suitcase. And I'm just like, oh, you can take these. They end up in the trash can. So just don't do that. This is a pet peeve and is in a lot of our trainings too. If you're at a high school visit and you're talking about your requirements and you say, oh, we have a lot of high school courses that are required, you should check out the admissions website. They wouldn't be coming to your presentation, or if the school counselor is asking you questions, you know, what are your deadlines? If you just say, oh, it's on the website, they don't have time to go searching through every page, and most college websites are not that user-friendly, because you get to the main page and you still have to find admissions, and you finally have to find freshman admissions. And, you know, you really need to be super specific if you're going to just talk about a space on your website. You know, for example, we have a lot of transfer courses that students can access to find, you know, what transfers is what. Provide exact, you know, breadcrumbs to get to that spot. Or, you know, at the end say, hey, you asked some great questions about what our high school core course requirements are. I'll send y'all a link. Make sure you filled out a card, because here's an email that I have for you, and I can send you that link directly. it's just not, the whole reason why we're there is to give them information, and to tell them something's on the website is not helpful. One of the last things that can really get under the skin of a school counselor is to undermine their efforts. So, I mean, we have good examples all the time of things happening like this, where you might say to a student, oh, I gave that to your school counselor. Did I not give it to you? Or, yeah, I tried to make a visit happen with your high school, but your school counselor never responded. Or, you know, they never replied to my email. Basically, you're making them look bad to a family or a student or your supervisor or whatever. And later on, they're going to be, if they hear from that, like if the student says, hey, you know, so-and-so said that you sent my transcript, but you didn't. And, you know, that's really something that the school counselor only knows if they did or didn't, then you're not going to look good in their eyes. So don't ever say things that are disparaging about a school counselor. Even if it is true, just don't say it to the student. Try to deflect and reach out to the school counselor yourself to say, hey, I know this student requested their transcript, or they said they did. You know, how can we get this, you know, resolved? Okay, for a few more things to do or have in your toolkit for connecting with school counselors is to, if you have Facebook, join the College Admission Counselors Facebook group. This is, oh, it's a lot. There are posts in here all the time from school counselors and college reps, and it is a good microcosm of all the issues that we face in our profession. It can be a lot. I mean, there's posts probably every 5 minutes of something else, but you will see the concerns that school counselors have with email campaigns from institutions, or just sort of griping a little bit about the process and how it's, you know, difficult for students. I think it can make you a more aware professional. And then when you do have the power to make impacts or changes in something, you'll be able to do that, because sometimes they'll call out institutions on there and say, hey, this school won't get back to me, or, you know, don't send students here. And you want to be able to respond to that, or someone from your office might want to respond to that, either true or untrue statement. But in, I think your first year, it's a really good way to see the issues that are facing school counselors. Be the knowledgeable resource that they're expecting you to be. So even if it's in your first year, try to learn as much as you can about your own institution to be able to share out. And I think what you'll say more than anything in your first year is, I'm not really sure, but I'll get back to you. And when you say that, you really should follow up with that agreement that you've just given them. Ask them how their school year is going. We have a great topic right now. Well, not so great, but really, you know, what are the challenges y'all are facing? Gosh, I'm sure this has been a really tough year. You know, what are the things that we can do as an institution to help make sure it's not any harder on you or your students? Someone was talking about being annoying, and I think in talking with my admissions counselors, you have to be persistent. So, you know, don't every other hour email and say, hey, I haven't heard from you. Hey, I haven't heard from you. Start early, and if you haven't heard anything, continue reaching out. And sometimes it means that phone call is necessary to leave a voicemail. I promise they will have you on their to-do list of like, oh my gosh, I need to get back to so-and-so about XYZ. They have a long to-do list. Have patience. It takes time for them to make sure they're all set up for the school year, or just depending on the time of year, before they'll reach out to you when they have the moment. And even if it's a month later and you're like, hey, I know there's a lot going on. I'm here to help. Like, how can I make a visit happen? And then again, just have patience. I shared all the things that are barriers, but maybe there's another reason. Maybe you have the wrong contact information. So be patient, but also, you know, if you've done that research on the front end, you'll have the rewards later. Be responsive. So unlike what you're getting from them, maybe, you know, you're waiting a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks before you get a response. If they email you, this is your chance to share your knowledge, to really highlight that you are the person that they should be contacting. So as much as you can, be responsive, which is tough in times where there's high volume of emails coming in from students. But if you see a counselor email in there, especially if one, you're trying to get in contact with, the quicker you can respond, then the faster they'll know, oh yeah, I can reach out to so-and-so whenever, and I'll get a response back from them. This goes back to the last slide, but you have to follow through with what you say you're going to do. So if you said, hey, I'll send y'all a link after, or the school counselor is asking about your requirements, and you don't ever send that link that verbally you said you were going to, it kind of degrades that relationship that they thought they had with you. So you can really go above and beyond, send that email, send that follow-up, make sure that if you say it out loud, even if you can't get to it like that night, you can say, hey, I have a really packed travel schedule for the next 2 weeks. I'm going to put this on my list. As soon as I get back to the office, I'm going to send this to you. And then they know that timeline to expect it from you. And then as much as you can, prepare ahead of time for the school visit. You should research the high school that you're going to. In a lot of cases, there are special things about that high school that when you say certain things, it's going to throw people off or like throw up a red flag. So if you're like, if you talk to the school counselor and you say, yeah, I mean, your students, are they in IB classes? Well, if they're not an IB school, they're not going to have IB classes, and the school counselor's going to be like, do you even know like about my school? Or in my case, there were only juniors and seniors at the high school I was working at, and they would ask to speak to our sophomores, and I'm like, we don't have them. So it takes a little bit of effort, but sometimes little sentences like that make the school counselor realize like, oh, this person really isn't invested in my students. And I think really for the top schools that you're working with, you should absolutely know whether they offer AB, IP, dual credit, vocational classes. You should have a good idea of their curriculum before opening your mouth to ask those questions of the school counselor. And then really nice touch, if you can ask to assist with their financial aid night, even if you're not a financial aid professional, being another person representing higher education that can be there to help support students and families in applying to college, it goes a long way. Maybe the school counselor wants to host an essay workshop, but they don't have time to do it themselves. So, as you're departing, or if you can't get a general day visit, you could suggest, hey, we have this presentation about, personal statements, essays, activities, whatever it is about applying to college you want to present on. We can do a virtual link. Like if you want to send it to your students, we're happy to, provide that. While you're not in the high school, it's a nice touch if you can be that resource for families that they don't have to reinvent the wheel to host for themselves. All right, so just a quick recap. I think we covered the ways to stay connected and different touch points that you can have outside of just email and phone calls. But hopefully we covered who you're trying to connect with, what they're facing in their day-to-day lives, that mutually beneficial relationship, what they want from you and what you're hoping to get from them, and then do's and don'ts. And then lastly, if we have time, or if you're still within the chat, if you want to share some successes, or if you want to unmute, I am happy to hear and excited to hear if y'all have had something that works really well, or something that you found out doesn't work and don't try it again, learn from experience. I think this is what Newcomers in person truly affords us. So I would love to hear if you're here and want to share any tips and tricks. One last thing I'll leave with y'all is they're known as school counselors now. There is sometimes a guidance office, but for the most part, school counselor really captures all different types of roles that folks may have that guide students. And I would be happy to connect with any of you if you have questions later on, whether it's through Kenneth and the CACRAO. I'm happy to connect. But for now, I will stop sharing my screen. So if anybody wants to join on, thanks for attending. I know there's a lot going on in a day as you're a new staff member. So feel free to drop in the chat any successes or challenges, and then, or jump on camera. Thanks, Jordan and Ty. Appreciate y'all tuning in. That's it for the main presentation. If y'all have anything you'd like to share, Chris, look forward to seeing y'all's names again, wherever it may be.